morning. This is Dr. Christine Bacon, and welcome to another broadcast of Breakfast with Bacon. And I have on the air today a face that you may not be familiar with, but you certainly are familiar with her voice because she's been on the Breakfast with Bacon show. What, Leila?
Is it 4 or 5 times now?
We love each other.
Half a dozen. We like that. Yeah.
We do love each other.
I love you. Yes, I love this woman. Everyone.
Well, and I love your ministry, Leila Miller. As you've been on, we talked about this book, Primal Loss, the Now Adult Children of Divorce Speak. We actually spoke about your other books as well that I don't have with me, Made This Way and
Raising Chaste Catholic Men.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we're talking about today. I know that the video probably has it backwards, but this is amazing. Impossible Marriages Redeemed. They didn't end the story in the middle. Leila Miller, my guest, used to be called Catholic bloggist, but you are a certified author. And is that the best way? Mother, wife. Anything else you define?
Right. I know. I never know quite how to say what I do. But yeah, Catholic wife and mom and grandma. And I've just somehow gotten 4 books under my belt, but that was after doing a lot of blogging and just writing. I've been a writer my whole life, just kind of casually. And then I do a lot of social media stuff, but that's just because I'm sort of obnoxious and I have to get my thoughts out there. But really, I do feel like this topic of marriage and the crisis of divorce is so big, and I didn't really know a lot about it even until maybe 3-4 years ago myself, when I just sort of stumbled upon it. So now this sort of is the thing that I like to talk about because nobody really wants to talk about
start
divorce.
With this one real quick. Because I know the question. Tell our listeners, or viewers, I should say, Primal Loss. This was the one that really got you going. Tell them how that came about, and then we'll focus on this fantastic book as well.
Sure. So Primal Loss, again, quite by accident. Had a friend who, all grown up, she's in her 40s, has 6 kids, married, she's a convert. Conversations started to occasionally talk about complications in her life that I'd never had in my own life. Started to connect it. I started to connect it and thinking, well, Alicia's got these complications with her stepmom, and then the adult step siblings, and then her dad is drawn in this direction. Her mom is over here. I don't really understand, why every holiday is so fraught with difficulty and all these things are happening. And turns out it's all still a product of the divorce of her parents back in, I don't know, maybe the 70s or whenever. Well, she's not as old as I am, but when she was like 6 years old or something, then I thought, oh gosh, there's still stuff going on that she's dealing with. And then I thought, maybe I don't really know what people are dealing with out in the real world, people who've had to deal with divorces in their parents, in their lives. And so I started to ask other people about it. And long story short, I threw out like 8 questions for people in my social media, whoever wanted to answer anonymously. And that's very important that they were anonymous because they didn't want their parents to know that they're still hurting decades later. And so I put together these answers of these 8 simple questions in the book, Primal Loss, which is not my voice. I mean, people get mad at me. They're like, who are you to tell people? I'm like, I didn't say a word. I literally just let these people talk.
Put their stories together.
Exactly.
Collected their comments.
Exactly. So everybody gets mad at me. I'm like, I promise you, I didn't cherry pick this. I didn't try to manipulate anything. I asked because I didn't know. And then these questions, these answers came back that were so painful, so much pain. And it really just hit a nerve. It has not stopped. It's been 3.5 years and it's still hitting nerves right and left. But no one still really wants to talk about it. But the ones who do finally have a voice or do decide that this is the time they can finally tell their story. I mean, it's been very healing for a lot of people, but I still get a lot of people who are really upset about it, and it makes you wonder, why can't these kids have a voice? What's the narrative we're protecting here? So anyway, so that happened.
As far as I know, you are the only one, and maybe you're not, but I've known you now for over a year, maybe 2 years. And I don't know anybody else who has written a book that gives voice to the children of divorce, the victims of divorce. So, I mean, have you found it?
Well, it's pretty rare. It's usually one of the things I say in the introduction to that book is that I quote someone else saying that up until now, most of the divorce discussion has been from the point of view of the adults, and spoken to the adults. So it's the adults talking. It's the people who are getting divorced, who are, and the people who are studying the whole thing, study it from the perspective of the divorcees, or the people who, how they can handle things with the kids. But it's not usually from the voice or perspective of the children, unless it's the adults putting those words in the kids' mouths.
They're doing just fine. They're thriving.
Well, that's the thing. I hear this all the time. This is so funny. And again, there's two things that happen. One is that parents tell me, my kids are fine. They tell me they're fine. It's been 20 years, it's been 5 years, it's been however many years, but they assure me that they are just fine. And I know my kid, I know that they're fine. And I say, okay, that's great. I said, but actually I have people in the book who say, I tell my parents I'm fine. I can't even imagine if they knew how badly this has hurt me. I don't want them to know. I'm terrified that they will find out how damaged I am. So they keep up the narrative for many different reasons. I mean, there's self-protection reasons. You want to protect your parents. There's keeping the peace, being a pleaser. I mean, there's so many reasons why you keep the narrative going. However, there's another issue, and that is that a lot of, especially the younger, maybe if they're still in their 20s or so, they really do believe that they're fine and that this divorce didn't affect them. And then a couple things happen. One is they might get married at some point themselves, have their own kids, and realize, oh my gosh, it starts to suddenly hit them all at once what these effects are of their parents' divorce when they start their own marriages. Or some of them just kind of still say, nope, everything's good, everything's great. And then I say, okay, great. So would you do me the favor of just reading Primal Loss? I give free copies, free PDF copies. I never want to make money off of this. If somebody needs the book, they need the book. And so I offer it. And I've only had three people take me up on it who said, I'm totally fine. But I'll read it anyway. And then each of those times, the person has been absolutely devastated when they finally read the hearts of people just like them.
Yeah.
And they fall apart and they start connecting the dots of their own life and their own interior life and what has gone on. And then it's like a light bulb, has gone off. So I just really encourage people, you may not even know the woundedness of a broken family. You may think it's fine, but you may connect the dots to so many other things that you thought were unrelated to your parents' divorce. That's why it's so important. And the parents need to know that this doesn't just go away. And then they need to know even how to maybe make up for what happened to their kids years and years ago. I mean, there's always forgiveness, there's always healing, but we have to acknowledge injustice first before we can forgive it or acknowledge it or heal it. It has to be spoken. So that's just what this is. And it's tricky. It's tricky. It's painful.
I remember, I love this book for its, what I said I'd be talking about one book, but you can't talk about one book without talking about the other. So we'll just keep doing this. I remember how much it touched me. I'm an adult child of divorce, and I'm so grateful that neither of my parents have ever remarried. So in my mind, we travel. We just had a family reunion last Christmas. And we all went, and my mom was there, my dad was there. There wasn't a stepfather, there wasn't a stepmother. They sat at the table together, but I do see the residual of, anyway. So the point of it is, I loved the book because of its rawness and some of the answers, I think, under the, I can't remember where it said child sacrifice. Was that under the question of, what would you say to people who said that children are resilient?
Children are resilient.
Right.
Yeah, it's
just child sacrifice.
It's a bloodless. Yeah, it's a bloodless child sacrifice, and because the children are expected to bear the weight of this decision by the adults. Now, every child has an absolute right from God, not only to life itself. We know that, the abortion debate. But every child has a natural right from God to his or her married mom and dad. That's from the garden. God created marriage. Children came from the marriage. That's the point of it, is to have this protective family to be raised in with your mom and your dad. And so when that's taken away for whatever reason, it could be death. Death is we could at least acknowledge that death is a terrible thing. If a parent dies, then the child is allowed to mourn, and we are allowed to say that is a horrible thing that happened to this child.
Yeah.
But if a divorce happens, because again, it's the choice of the adults, who want to be happy, who want to have their romance, who want to have things the way that they think it's supposed to go, then the child is just supposed to go along with it. Because remember, if the parents are happy, the children are happy. That's
Really,
the line, right? You know, if
that's
your mom
one
is happy
truth.
with her new boyfriend, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not how it actually works. So, so these
It's
kids
a
are having their
false narrative. It was actually created as a lie, to
absolutely.
assuage the pain of those who have gone before in terms of divorce. And
It's the same, and this is, I always say this, and people, you have to really think about this, but I challenge anyone to think about this. I say the arguments for divorce are the same as the arguments for abortion. And we do the same thing. Well, it's just a one-time thing. Well, everyone's going to be happier in the end. Well, there's real suffering now, but we can get past it. We can move on and start again. There's all these different things that we say about abortion. But now with divorce, we're killing the child's family. I mean, we're killing a family, and the family is the foundation of a person. It's their identity. So yes, we're not killing it. Like you said, it's not a blood sacrifice of a child. It's a bloodless sacrifice of a child.
yeah.
And it doesn't just suddenly get better because you speak the narrative and everybody around you says it's okay. And we're all just going to say the same thing and repeat the same mantras. No, it doesn't happen that way. So we have to stop, and we have to stop the lie, and we have to look at what Christ taught. We have to look at the garden. We have to look at everything in its rightful, ordered way, and say that when we choose to take something away from children that is naturally their right, that is going to affect them in a very negative way, and we need to own it. We need to stop making excuses for it. And putting it on these kids. It's not their issue, and stop putting them on medication and taking them to therapists and telling them they're the acting out problem, and they're cutting and they're promiscuous and when can we point it back to the destruction of their family and the choices of the adults in their lives?
And I want to make sure anybody who's watching right now knows that neither you nor I am casting judgment on anyone who's gotten divorced. I filed for divorce. I left my husband for 4 years. I did not. I prayed for him to die. I hated him. So I know how painful it is to be in. I'm not judging you for wanting to be in. There are some really rotten marriages out there where we want to escape it. It's like any animal. Monsignor Mike McCarran told me years ago when I went to him about a troubled marriage. He said, it's like an animal being caught in a trap. A wolf will be out there, step in a trap, and the pain on his leg is so awful that he will do anything to escape that pain, including chewing off his leg. Once he chews off his leg and runs away, he is forever a three-legged wolf and crippled, all because he wanted to escape that pain. So we alter. Divorce is just one of those ways of cutting off one of our legs and leaving us crippled. We may find someone that makes us happy, but it doesn't always make the kids happy. And actually, most of the time, it doesn't make the kids happy. It's so, and we have to acknowledge that marriage is not designed to make us happy. It's designed to make us holy. And the Lord blesses so much. He said, blessed are those who are persecuted. Blessed are those who suffer. Those are the ones that are closest to his heart, because we join our suffering to his. I guess we're getting a little bit off there, because it's not just, well, no, we're not getting off. It's not just those who suffer. Suffering, there's redemptive value in suffering.
Yes.
So.
Right. And we're not taught that anymore, that your suffering has meaning, and that the cross is actually our path to salvation. That's right. That's how Christ designed it. And even when you talk about, chewing off your leg to get out of the pain, and again, it brought up the idea that that's what we tell women about abortion as well. It's like, women just it's a terrible thing. It's like they're trying to just chew off their own leg to get out of it. Yes, we get that. It's a horrible thing. Sometimes we are stuck in very difficult situations. The lie comes in, whether it's abortion or divorce, when we're told the only way you can get out of this, whisper, the devil's whispering, is to transgress the moral law in some way. And then suddenly you're going to be free and you're going to feel great. And it never quite works out that way. There might be an initial relief, whether it's, again, abortion or divorce. There might be initially like, yes, I'm free. I'm done with this. But the consequences are still going to be there down the line at some point. And not just for you, but for others. And so that's just what we need to keep in the forefront. Is it's very easy to say, I need to get out of this suffering. I need to throw off this cross, no matter what it is. It could be a bad, it could be a hundred different things, but throwing off the cross when you morally aren't permitted to do a certain thing, you're going a route that isn't morally in keeping with Christ's law, then you've got to know that temptation is to throw off that cross is not from God. It's from the evil one, and he's going to make you feel good about it, but it won't be good for you or anyone around you in the end. And that's what we're really trying to get to is what is it when Christ said, take up your cross and follow me, and when we take a sacred vow and we know that that's part of our cross, what does that mean? Like, how does he get us through that? What does that do for our own souls, for those around us? And that's why the second book, and this is kind of a segue, the second book shows that. It actually shows what happens if you stick with the cross. If you don't just throw it off and put it on the shoulders of your kids, what if you stick through the hard times and get through to the other side? What does that look like?
And that's the cover of the book.
There you go.
It's not showing backwards. Is it reading backwards?
It reads good to me. It's reading forwards. Yeah.
Possible marriages redeemed. They didn't end the story in the middle.
In the middle, right.
So tell us about this book then, Leila, because it almost feels like after writing Primal Loss, you needed a nice drink of refreshing water.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. So even the cover picture, it's the same spot. So it's the same spot of, this desolation in the winter and this poor child sitting alone versus the summer, the beautiful green and the old couple sitting there having made it through. And so what happened with the first book is that my bishop and a few other priests, they really liked chapter 10 of Primal Loss, because chapter 10, I thought it was such a difficult, traumatic book to get through. So I put this chapter at the end, which was other people. It was people who had gone through difficult marriages and come out the other end and survived and redeemed those marriages. And it's just so beautiful. So I just had a few of those stories. And then my bishop and Bishop Olmsted of Phoenix, and then some priests, they said, we really like that chapter. We could really use, one priest said, I could really use a whole book of those stories. And so I did it. I asked people, tell me your horrible marriage stories. It's things that today we just would definitely say, yeah, you need to go, you need to leave, and how you got through it. I want to hear those stories. And so I was about halfway through editing these incredible stories when I realized these are really conversion stories. I didn't realize. I thought they were just human interest and isn't this interesting? And yeah, it's great. And then I started to realize the change is the change of conversion of the heart and the allowance of God's grace into even just one spouse, even if just one spouse allows that grace, that's when things started to turn around. And so these stories are incredible because people are divorcing for a lot less than what you're going to read in these stories. Yeah. Forgiveness, the turning, and instead of looking at our spouse's sin, which is huge, and we women do this a lot. Yes. Instead of analyzing our spouse and his sin, the woman would turn inward and say, okay, I'm not going to worry about his sin right now. I'm going to worry about my relationship with God, my relationship with Christ, my interior life, my holiness. And then she would start to change. And then when she'd start to change, her husband would start to change, her marriage would start to change. So it's really fascinating to see how this works.
Jump on that concept there, because if you really believe, and this show is, definitely for people who have a faith, understand this. But if you truly believe that something takes place spiritually when you get married, the two really do become one. God doesn't use it as a metaphor. He says the two, husband and wife, become one flesh. And so I say, first of all, with divorce, when one tears away, it is an absolute painful thing. It's going away, but I got stitches I
Oh
got
my
my finger,
goodness.
I thought I lost the tip.
Oh
But when this,
gosh.
oh yeah, so I got 8 stitches and they're healing. But these two
Wow.
pieces of flesh are pulled apart. And even with the stitches, when the stitches came out for people who, like for the healing phase of this, is still very painful because the two sides of the flesh are not connected. And so in a marriage, it's the same type of thing. When you are one flesh and you begin to be one flesh on that altar, that first day or in the front of the judge, right? And so when one of them comes away, it pulls, it's painful. It's meant to be painful because you have already started the process of becoming one. So when a spouse, on the converse, like you just said, Leila, if I and my husband are apart and I change who I am praying for my other half of my flesh. You can't heal one half of a wound without unintentionally healing the other half of the wound. And that's
Right.
why, again, I'll let you get back to the book, but when I work with my couples, the one thing I hear more often than anything is, well, I want to make it work, but I can't change my spouse. I'm like, but alas, you can.
Yes.
You change, you 100% changes your spouse. And then I give them examples when we talk. So your principle is 100% spot on. Begin in me and watch what God does in the other.
Okay, I want to ask you a question if you don't mind, Christine, because you're not expecting this from me, but I love your book, and I have used some of the things that you've said in your book for talks that I've given to young women. And I will say that most divorces today are initiated by women, and I blame feminism for a whole bunch of that because we don't understand the difference between men and women are men are expected to understand women, and women are not expected to understand men. In fact, we don't care what they think. We just need them to be our girlfriends and to fulfill us emotionally and all that. And it's causing a lot of problems. And of course, the girlfriends all pile on and say, he's being, you don't deserve that. And what do you mean he's criticizing you? But we can criticize our husbands endlessly, and that's noble, right? That's noble. But so what I would like to ask you, because I think this is super important, because the things in this book are very, some of them are very dramatic. I mean, pornography, you've got addictions, you've got multiple affairs, tons of things, bad stuff. But people are divorcing now, including Christian people, for very slight reasons, things that aren't that bad. Just things like, well, he's not fulfilling me, or, I'm not getting emotionally what I need from this person, or it's not my
I recently
soulmate, or
heard a
whatever.
woman say to me, I haven't been actualized.
Oh gosh.
Allow me to get actualized.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. That sort of thing. That drives me.
I don't think I've been actualized yet either. But
I don't think I have either. 30 years. We're married 30 years this month. Actually, next week is my 30th anniversary. Yeah. And, I don't know if I've been actualized. I don't know. I'll talk to Dean about that.
Maybe.
So my question, or the thing that I've used from your work, and that I used, and I spoke in front of these young women at a parish that I spoke, and they all started to cry. I'm not kidding you. Some of them have babies in their arms, and it started to, like, light bulbs again, popping, is that men are, you talk about this cycle, and there's hormones involved too, but this cycle that men want to know that they can please their wives.
Yes.
And if they can please their wives, their testosterone goes up. And then women feel more loved, and then women want. And so what we women do, and I want you to talk about this, Christine, because I love what you say. It's so simple, and it could save so many marriages. We are not easily pleased. Women these days are not easily pleased. They criticize, where I was like, thanks for hanging the blinds, honey. Yeah, I wish you'd done it 3 days ago, but really, thank you. Well, right then, like, the guy's deflated. He's like, okay,
right,
she's not easily pleased. I can't please her. Is testosterone drops. So it becomes this cycle, and her, oxytocin drops, and it just goes around. But can you give a little bit of that to the viewers? Because I think that is so important to understand.
Yeah, and actually it's so funny because I brought your books here and I left mine on the bookshelf.
Oh my gosh, I wish I had yours. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I call it the oxytocin testosterone cycle. And I'll start with saying, for years I had heard that phrase, happy wife, happy life. And I really hated it because it made us women sound like a bunch of prima donnas. And I was like, I want my husband happy too. It's not just about me. Well, that's not true. It really is about the wife. If the wife is happy, then the marriage is happy. And here's why. So, and I thought this was astounding when I did the research and I saw it. I was like, oh my gosh. So when a man seeks to please his wife, whether it's hanging the French doors, just buy me my favorite. You wanted Italian, I wanted Chinese. You went to Chinese. That's his way of saying, I just want to make my wife happy. I love her. I'm a simple man. Give me sex every now and then when I need it. Well, daily if you could, but but that's all I want. I just want you to be happy. I want to have a full belly. I want to have, sex.
And when we say men are simple, I just want to say, you all know what we mean. Simple, not meaning dumb or whatever. Simple meaning their needs are much less complex. Men are easily
it's easier.
pleased. Yeah, men can be pleased pretty darn easily. And that is something women don't understand, or they
God
resent.
made us this way. Too many of us are, men are pigs, or my husband shouldn't this or that. I'm like, well, wait a minute. It is not his fault that he's visually stimulated. It is not his fault that he desires sex 6 times more frequently than you do. It is not his fault that his hypothalamus, the sex center, is larger than yours. It is not your fault that your hippocampus, the emotion center, is bigger than his. God was very strategic when he did this. He made it so that the male had strengths in a place where a woman had weaknesses and vice versa. And so he said, okay, I'm going to make you the head of the family, which we don't even have to get going there because the feminists are like, oh my gosh, right there. But one of my favorite phrases from the movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, Tula's coming to her mom, why does dad get to be the head? And he always makes all the decisions. And her mother said, Tula, don't worry about that. The man is the head, but the woman is the neck. And it was a really awesome way of saying you can turn a man's head. You have so much more power to do so. Well, how is it? So the oxytocin testosterone cycle simply says a man wants to be pleased. If he does something, hangs the French doors, and you're happy, your only responsibility is to express that happiness with a sincere thanks, honey, or that really made me feel good, or even body language, or like whatever. If a man knows, and there's 2 points here, not just that his wife is happy, but that he is the source of her happiness, his testosterone goes up. What's important about that? Testosterone is his happy hormone. That's the hormone that gives him energy. So it's like, oh, my wife, she's happy. I'm going to try it. I have more energy. I want to do something else for her. She reciprocates like, wow, thanks, honey. Then her oxytocin just stays up, and because of his selfless acts of pleasing her. So people say, well, isn't it the same the other way around? I'm like, no, because if you go out of your way to please your husband and he shows you he's happy, your oxytocin does not increase. I'm like, really? Why is it? Because God wired women to serve and to dote on and to love, right? That's why God says in the Bible, I'm going to command you guys to love, because love isn't natural for you. Respect is more natural for you. But to love, I'll make you the head of the family, but to be a good head, you have to put her needs before your own. We are missing that, Leila, because like you just said in your example, your husband will hang the French doors, but then you'll knock it down. It's
right.
like, yeah, well, I told you 6 months ago to do it. So then his testosterone actually decreases. He's got less energy. It's like, whatever. And so no matter what you complain about, did you ever notice that men say, oh, my wife complains. Well, women would say, and I say it to Danny all the time, I'm not complaining. I'm just stating, I'm explaining. Yeah. But I have to be critical of myself. If what I'm saying, whether it's my fault or not, is coming out sounding like a complaint, then I need to check myself. I get even better at saying, Danny, I am so happy that right now my room is being turned into an office. It doesn't benefit you at all in one way, but you're doing this all for me, and that blesses our husbands so much, because he's got more energy to please me. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so I think, yes. And when women understand that it is in their best interest to love the masculine nature the way God made it and to honor that, it's in their best interest, because they will be happier too. Everybody is going to be so much happier if we understand each other and how we're wired. Men protect and provide, women love and nurture, women want to be cherished, men want to be respected. I mean, if we really stop poo-pooing that and saying that's just obnoxious or that's just, you know, a construct, but if we really live that, you're going to find a completely different marriage. And I know we're kind of off of the books, but I love this. I'm really excited about this, and I want to tell you what I've learned too from all these people now who come to me. I'm not a therapist as you are, but people come and they have these same problems, and it's almost always the same solution. And so I want to juxtapose a couple of situations and show women exactly what's happening here, and so they can see it clearly, because women will understand what I'm talking about. If a man, imagine this, imagine a husband comes home and says, oh gosh, this house is so messy. What have you been doing all day? You know, can't you have this house cleaned up for me, or what? And how come dinner's not ready? And why aren't you, why are the kids still, running around their underwear? What's going on here?
Throat punch yet?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So now every woman who hears that is like, they're starting to get like, oh my gosh, I mean, look how he's criticizing. And then they'll take that to their girlfriends, and their girlfriends will be like, how dare he speak to you that way? How is he what a jerk, you deserve so much better than this. Now, okay, turn the tables. Imagine a woman saying to a man, you're being too loud with the kids. Why are you talking to the child in that tone of voice? Why did you load the dishwasher this way? How come you haven't hung the French door yet? On and on and on. Now we will say as women, yeah, this guy should be doing that. How come he's not? So we're criticizing just as much as maybe this first scenario dude, but we're doing it as women, and we think it's noble. We're like, oh, I can't believe it. Like, how come he's not using a softer tone of voice? And I was like, well, wait a second. Everything you say to him, it is criticizing him. If he did that to you as a woman, you'd be up in arms and ready to divorce the guy. But we can do it to a man, thinking we're just completely in the right, and we can criticize him no matter what because we're right and he's wrong. What? Because we're women? Not realizing you're undermining everything about his masculinity. You're undermining his respect. You're undermining the fact that he's the head of the family. You're undermining his masculine confidence, and yet we cheer each other on when it comes to bringing down our husbands. But if a man even would dare say, "Hey, could you?" Even if they did it nicely, could you maybe clean up the house a little bit more, or something like, oh, how dare you, you pig, you chauvinist, all this stuff. It's like, okay, let's at least recognize what we're doing, that if we don't want it done to us, let's try not to do it to him, and see if that changes the dynamic of our relationship a little bit. So I just don't think we realize what we're doing.
This conversation is actually challenging me again, because here I am, married 37 years as big marriage coach, right? And I'm listening going, oh my God, I just failed at all of this yesterday.
I do it all. I fail at this constantly.
And I'm like, I need to go downstairs and apologize to my husband. Hold on, I'll be
every day. I know. I'm the same way. I constantly, I'm like, Dean didn't do this right. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Does he ever do that? He really doesn't.
He does everything in this house.
Yeah.
He does electrical, he does plumbing, he's putting a wall up, he's giving me a studio, he's using our entire tax return.
Yeah.
And me, I know he's got plenty of things he'd want to use it on. He put a garden, he did, and yet we tend to take those things for granted.
Yeah.
Now, but your book, Impossible Marriages Redeemed, I mean, they may have actually had a husband who didn't do those things from someone who was an alcoholic, someone who was in a
very bad. Yep. Very bad stuff. Very bad stuff.
But I'm excited for you to get to this, because I don't want the show to be a downer.
Yes.
So tell me about some of these stories. So this is 50 separate people who's married.
So it ends up being 65 stories. The first 50 are the marriages that have been redeemed. So they're better. They went back on track. And your story's in there, because I have three. I think I have three that are not anonymous. Yeah, three that are public figures that are not anonymous. And then the last 15 stories are standers. And those are people basically who said, I've been abandoned. My husband or wife has moved on, abandoned me. I'm still going to stand for my vow. And that's another really heroic group of people. So that I don't want to, but they're different types of stories. So, but the first 50 are Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, the first story is a woman who she finds out that, you know, she has twins. Her kids just had their first Holy Communion, and she has other little kids, and she had the happiest day of her life. 2 days later, she sees her husband's phone beep. It's got little hearts on it. She realizes her husband's been having an affair. I mean, the bottom drops out of her life. She becomes an alcoholic. I mean, you know, these are the bad things that happen. And then the process of how to get over that kind of devastation. How do you ever forgive that? How do you go forward? How do you even get up in the morning? Well, she didn't. She became an alcoholic. And then, I mean, on top of everything, and then years later, he had another affair. I mean, they got back together, then there was another affair, you know, so that's like, how can this be? This is clearly impossible. There's no way this marriage can work. Well, I can tell you, the marriage is thriving at the moment. I happen to know this person. But it's the steps that this person takes. And the number one thread, I think, through all of these stories is, well, number one is God's grace. God is in this. If you do not kick God out of your marriage, I don't care what happened, you can find a way. He is a God of miracles. We know this. If we are not a people of redemption, then as Christians, then we are nothing. Then our whole faith means nothing. The whole point of it is redemption.
If he can change Saul to Paul.
Except a murderer of Christians, yes.
Yeah. He can
and made him into the greatest.
Your husband's hard heart or your wife's hard heart. He can help an alcoholic stop drinking. He can help someone addicted to pornography be healed.
Absolutely.
Of that. And he
Absolutely.
can certainly bring you two back together to cherish the marriage more greatly. Did you notice that? Because I read the whole book. I read both your books. Did you notice that too? That there's more of a, I tend to believe that people who went through this stuff and got back together are happier than those couples who never went through anything at all. Because we know what we almost lost.
Yes.
You know?
It is a rebirth. You know, it's just this, it's a rebirth. It's a reconnection of, oh my gosh, I don't, there is a woman, oh my goodness. And this woman is a living saint. She is now probably in her 70s, but it's one of the stories in the book. And her husband, they have like 6, 7, 8 kids, I'm not sure, left her two or three different times over the course of their marriage. And at one point he literally divorced her and married another woman. And that happens more than once too in this.
Yeah.
But she clung to the Lord. She clung to holy priests. In her case, her spiritual director actually is someone who's actually up for sainthood now in the Catholic Church, which that's how amazing. Father John Hardin was her spiritual director. And, but she went through these stages. She's a young mother and he left, and then middle age and he left, and they are together now, reaping the benefits of all their children, all their grandchildren. Their children are all married and happy. They're stable. Their grandchildren are thriving, and they are now in their 70s. They just lost a child to ALS, actually. The grace that emanates from this couple is unbelievable. And now she helps other young women who are going through the torment of infidelity. She advises them on what to do. And basically it's so simple in some ways. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple to stay right close to Christ. You stay close to Christ. You understand that you're undergoing this cross, and you keep your vow. You keep your vow, and you do not succumb to bitterness and resentment and revenge. Yeah. You know, we all want resentment and revenge, because if we feed ourselves with resentment and revenge, it's like a drug. You know, they say that resentment is a drug because it makes you feel righteous. You do. You're
anger and your hatred.
Yes, you can feed it. But the problem is, and my friend Dr. Monica Brose says this: resentment and bitterness comes with no graces. You don't get any grace at all from resentment and bitterness and non-forgiveness. You get grace from embracing and carrying your cross. that's how you get grace. That's how the saints got their grace. You know, that's how Christ redeemed the world. He didn't redeem the world through his miracles. He redeemed the world through his death, through his undergoing of evil, and then being faithful through it all. And then
while we were sinning, and I know
while we were
we've
sinning,
gone to church and we've heard these things again and again. I think it's important to slow down and hear exactly what we're saying. You know, Jesus said, and while we were sinners, he died for us. Let me just put this out there. It's like, while my husband was having an affair, I still loved him. While my wife was an alcoholic and left me, I still loved her. While my spouse had bipolar episodes, took us into bankruptcy, I still loved her. It is so countercultural that if we truly follow Christ's example, truly love with no conditions, that's when we understand what Christ did on the cross. Because I picture him on the cross, right? Looking 2,000 years into the future, going, I love you, Christine, and I'm dying for you, even though I'm seeing this affair you're going to have in 1986. And I still love you, Leila, even though I saw the way that you spoke of me or to me. I still love you, Jim, even though you're sex trafficking children right now. When we can really wrap our brains around that kind of true love, and then we look at our marriages, can I love my spouse while he's looking at me saying, I never loved you. I love this person more than you. Move on. I'm never getting back with you. If
yeah.
we really love Christ and want to follow his example, it says, but I still love you.
Wow. It is a supernatural love. I mean, you can't do it without grace. It is no human being can do this, but Christ can work and live within us, and we can do it with Christ who lives within us. We can do it. My a really good priest friend told me that Jesus love is the love of an abandoned spouse, or he loves, that's the kind of love he has. And I said, oh yeah, his love is like the love of an abandoned spouse. He said, no. I said, Jesus' love is the love of an abandoned spouse, because he is the ultimate abandoned spouse. We betrayed him. We betrayed him
daily.
And what did he do? Did he say, I'm done, I forget you? No, he said,
I don't deserve you. I deserve better. I deserve to be happy.
He deserved not to die on that cross, didn't he? So he kept his promise as the faithful spouse, the abandoned spouse who was treated so badly and so unfaithfully. He kept the vow to love until death. He loved to death. He loved us till his death, and he didn't abandon us. So if we take a vow that says we will love in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, richer for poorer, all the days of our life till death parts us, there is no condition to that. And 50% of that is negative, that we're promising that we're going to stay true. Now, I'm going to throw this in because everybody's going to scream. I get screamed at constantly.
I won't scream now.
I know. Thank you. What about abuse? You know, always. Okay, look, no one is saying that you have to stay and be a punching bag, for example, and that you're going to stay in a dangerous household. What we're saying is you can still love someone and still stay true to that vow, even if you have to physically separate from that person, okay? Even for a time, even indefinitely. But interestingly, if you keep that vow and you love that person unconditionally, like you promised, just like Christ loves us, no matter how terrible and abusive we are to him, you will find graces there that will blow your mind and change everyone's life, your life, the people around you. This is why we're not like the world.
Right.
The world says, go, move on.
I am so excited. Can I take you right there with that abuse?
Take it.
Okay, so first of all, when I was in my master's degree, this woman in a class with me, her name is Debbie, she actually was abused by her husband, pushed her down the stairs at one point. Her transformation, left, it was really bad. And I wish I could remember the whole story, but there was a transformation. And he is devoted to her now. They're reconciled. He's no longer abusive. They were actually on the 700 Club, talking about what kind of transformation? So that's that. So let me touch another thing on abuse. Let's go do that radical case,
Let's
right?
do it.
6 out of 10 people who were abused will abuse. So here's this child, I'm beat by my parent or whatever, and I'm cowering under the bed saying, when I grow up, I will never ever hit my wife. I'll never ever hit my kids. Yet when I grow up, 6 out of 10 of us will, because we didn't learn any differently. So if you can look at your abusive spouse, first of all, realize that he or she was likely abused as well. It does not mean you stay as a punching bag.
Right.
I'm looking into the camera. I'm not saying you should remain a punching bag. However, that child who grew up to be an abuser was abandoned. That child was neglected. That child was hurt. And what we get used to is when someone hurts me, they run. When I hurt someone, they run. So typically the abuser is waiting, not consciously, but subconsciously. I know you're going to leave me. Everybody does. So I'm just going to protect myself. And so the natural inclination when someone hurts us is to go the other way. I touch fire, I pull my hand back, right? So one of the things I teach my couples is when your spouse hurt, now, off of physical abuse for a moment, but like when Danny and I say something, or I'm screaming, I'm like, I'm just so mad, oh, just get away from me, right? The natural response is to pull away. But I told my husband, I tell spouses, if you lean in at that very moment and you put your arms around someone, you're actually going to get a different response. And Danny, I could see him. He was repulsed at the thought of it, but he's so manly that one day he pulled away, but I saw him. He leaned and he put his arms around me. Like, no matter how much we fight, I'm still here. I have to tell you, I was angry, but in the middle of that fight, it was just so hard to stay angry at him because it was like, oh my gosh. So if we go back to this abuse case, when you say, I love you, I will not tolerate abuse. We will stay in separate houses for a while, but I will never divorce you because I believe in you and I believe you can get help. And that abuser will push and push and push and push and wait, well, I don't want your freaking help. Yeah, I'm not, but when you still say, but I'm still standing, there is so much more healing when that person, because it's like, why are you not leaving me? I've done everything I can to push you away. And so to a lower degree with, non-physically abusive, that's what happens in many of our marriages. I hurt you, I'm used to you. Well, actually, let's go back to the first book you talked about. You had plenty of those kind of stories in this Impossible Marriages Redeemed. My parents were divorced. I saw that people abandoned, so I just set it up and waited for my husband to leave me because I knew that's what people did. So does that kind of make point?
The children of divorce, we're going to perpetuate this cycle every time we just say, you're unlovable, so I'm going to kick you to the curb. Yeah. And as soon as a child sees that in parents, oh gosh, that means the minute I'm unlovable, my spouse one day is going to kick me to the curb. I have to be perfect. I have to be lovable. Well, nobody can be that, right? So then you've set up this impossible situation for this child who's become a pleaser, but who can't, because all they've seen is that conflict leads to permanent separation. And, the minute you become unlovable, you're cut out of someone's life forever. We cannot heal these generations until we stop it, until somebody keeps a vow and says, I'm not going to put up with this. I have a boundary, but I'm not going to stop loving you. I'm not going to kick you to the curb. So,
and that's attractive. Spiritually, physically, it's like, how come you still love me? And we kind of want, what the heck is going on with you?
Exactly.
Attracted to that because it's Christ.
And isn't that what Christ did? I know that's the thing. Like, is that not what Christ did with every one of us?
Yeah.
Isn't that what Christ did with every one of us? And so
love is patient. If you really, again, I always one of those that wants to make the theoretical practical.
Yeah.
So, Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind. Of course, I love my husband. Okay, love is patient. Have you ever been impatient with him or her? Have you ever sat and honked on the horn because she wasn't moving out fast? And I was like, what? Because in that moment of impatience, you stopped loving because the love is patient. Have you ever said an unkind word to or of your spouse? Because in that unkind word, you stopped loving. You don't even have to say it. Have you ever thought something unkind? My spouse is just such a jerk. Because in that moment, you stop loving. So when you say you have unconditional love and you stop loving all these moments, that's when I look at people and say, so let's work with you. And especially with women, love does not keep record of wrongs.
Right.
how many of us women are like, and back in 1983, I
Exactly.
remember when you, right, and our husbands,
I'm
I
so
remember what I had for dinner yesterday.
I'm so guilty. So I'll tell you about one of the fights that really illuminated me with my husband. Again, we were probably married. This is probably like a year or two ago. You know, I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress, 30 years. Poor boy, that poor man. But he, I was harping on something. Yeah, something from the past. I'm sure it was like, you know, it wasn't even anything probably very serious at all. I mean, he's a very good man. And I'm harping on it and harping on it. And again, generally speaking, men aren't the ones to be the harpers who are just picking about every little thing. Some do, but mostly it's the women who do that. That's just our nature and our fallen nature. Everyone has different fallen nature. Right. Men have their pitfalls and we have ours. And I remember he just finally, again, after all these years, he probably has meant to say it for years and years and years, but he just looked at me, he said, "You're so petty. You're so petty." And I thought, what? I kind of got offended for a second. And I thought, I am petty. Oh my gosh, why am I so petty? Like it actually opened up this incredible avenue of grace for me to see all the petty, if someone were that way with me, I'd say the same thing. I'd be like, why are you being so petty? I'm only human. I'm not perfect, but we just don't see it in ourselves. We have I think it was Dan Burke that says, you know, humans have an unlimited capacity for self-deception. We really think we're better than we are. And, but we see the worst in our spouses. And I will tell you, can I tell you one story that I thought was really
I'm actually
illustrative?
taking notes right here.
Oh my gosh. Well, and you need to, I don't even think you told the name of your book. You need to tell people. I mean, I'm sure your viewers know it, but.
Yeah, the Super Couple, a formula for extreme happiness in marriage. We'll talk about that another time because interviewing those extremely happily married couples saved my marriage.
Well, it's excellent. I love your book. But the story that I'm thinking of, because you kind of brought something up where you said, if you take divorce off the table, things change. So there's a couple where the husband, the woman is, you know, really kind of calling the shots. You know, she's wearing the pants in the family and she's very, you know, assertive and she knows what is right and what's wrong and why he's doing wrong, what he should be doing better. And she doesn't hesitate to tell him. And, he's drinking all the time. In fact, he's getting fired from his job. He's passing out at work. And she's like, you know, and she keeps throwing out, every time they have a big fight, she keeps throwing out the D word, you know, I'm going to divorce you. And because that's what her mom always did. Her mom always threw out the D word. And then he just keep drinking and he just keep, you know, going inside of himself and, you know, shutting her out and drinking. Finally, one day, and the reasons are in the book, but she said to him during a fight, I just want you to know, you know, I'm mad about this, that, blah, blah, but I am never, ever going to divorce you. I will never leave you. And every single thing changed at that moment for him. His whole masculine understanding of, you know, who he was he got his confidence back. Wow. He realized, she's not going to leave me. I don't have that threat hanging over my head anymore. We're going to be a couple no matter what. We have a family, we have kids. We're going to do this together.
We talk about that testosterone dropping. Yes. That is like the biggest. And then saying, I'll never divorce you.
Everything changed. And that's one of the few stories in the book where both the man and the woman tell their side of the story. So his words are in there as well as hers. And it is so powerful. Yes. And they are the happiest couple.
Every story in here, driving down to Florida.
Yeah. It's very emotional. I mean, it's a very good, it's a page turner. If you're on the beach, it's a great book.
And it's a happy book.
It's a happy book.
It is something we need.
Hope. It's got hope in it. Every page is hopeful. And they have a beautiful marriage now. He's not drinking. He's got a job. I mean, they are lovey-dovey. I mean, they're really cute and they have lots of children, and it just turned around because of one decision she made to say that she was never going to divorce him.
Do you know what caused her to say that, just offhand? Because I've read the book. Do you remember what made her?
I think it was that she had a coworker who had been divorced. This older gentleman at work had said, when she said, I'm going to divorce him, and he was a Christian man, and he said, you know what? You need to take that off the table because it's not, he knew from experience that divorce was not a good thing. And she took his advice. I think she said, oh, I really admire this guy. He's an older, wiser man. And I think she incorporated that and said, okay, fine. You know, I'm still going to, you know, in her mind, I'm sure it was like, we're still going to fight all the time and things are going to be terrible, but at least I guess, you know, I'm not going to divorce him. And she let him know that, and it turned everything around. So,
You know, I want to make sure our listeners, I always say listeners because I'm used to my radio show, go watch me Breakfast with Bacon on, you know, if you're,
I love
breakfastwithbacon.com. I'm on
this.
the real radio here Fridays from 11 till noon Eastern Standard Time. But this viewing here, you can now watch Breakfast with Bacon as well. But I say all the time, and I need you to know, hope never fails, right? That's in the Bible. One of the ways Satan tries to win is by telling us that 50% of marriages will fail, which actually isn't true. It was a false um, narrative that was put out there, and I could go, but we're not. You and I have those conversations when we hang up, right? But it's actually statistically less than 40%. The bigger problem right now is people aren't marrying, but let's go with the good side.
Right.
Your marriage is more likely to survive at least 6 out of 10. And the reason is census data. They had no real way of collecting data, so they collected the number of marriages in a particular census period and the number of divorces. But censuses are every 10 years. It didn't take into consideration your 30-year marriage or my 37-year marriage. So there's all these people in the middle who neither married nor divorced that are still should be in there. So that drops the number. So the reason that is so important to get that information out there is to say, no, it isn't a crapshoot. You are likely to stay married, and it's not just a few people who reconcile. When I talked to someone recently, said, well, barely anybody reconciles. I set her straight right away. I said, no, there are thousands of reconciliations every year. And you know what? People just aren't talking because who wants to put their crap out there?
Right.
Who wants
Right. They're
to
not
say,
doing
well,
it.
yeah, I was an alcoholic, and well, I had
Right.
an affair. Ooh, that wasn't a good time. Don't do that, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
God's kind of commissioned me to say, open your big mouth, Christine. You did some bad stuff in your marriage, but now, you know, I will turn your mess into your message. And he
That's
really
beautiful.
has. He has. I just am so that this man came back to me after I humiliated him by sleeping with another man, and everybody knew it. And for him to come back to me and said, I'd like to reconcile our marriage, that exposes him to a lot of judgment. And yet he chose to love like Christ. And I try to tell him as often as I can, thank you. Thank you for being a godly man, for being my Hosea, you know?
You said something so beautiful in your story in my book, which you were so brave to share, that when the offended
Humbles himself
before the offender, right? Because he
That's
wasn't
right.
the one who was unfaithful. You were unfaithful to him, and he wanted to stay together, and you still said, nah, I don't want to, and you still, you know, had a 4-year separation, and he humbled himself before you. Now that is something that modern, you know,
So countercultural.
sensibilities would say, don't ever make yourself humiliated in front of another person like that. It's like, well, Christ was humiliated for us, and for Danny to be so humble in that way is just so Christ-like. And so
everything that saves your marriage is countercultural.
Countercultural, yes. You can do it God's way and be happy, or you can do it the world's way and be right, except that you're going to destroy everything around you in the process. Or you can have the grace to redeem what you have.
Yeah. So you know, being the offender, humbling yourself before the offended humbling himself before the offender. That's exactly what Jesus did.
Exactly.
I'm offended, but I'm going to humble myself before you. Give me those nails.
Yep.
Right?
Unbelievable.
So powerful. I want to ask you, because I know we don't have tons of time. There you go. Time. But did you have a favorite story in the book? Were there some that were just like touched you? I mean, I know mine was your favorite, clearly, but besides that.
Yes, yours was my favorite. It was. Well, I have to say, the favorite story, the most powerful story, and they're so good, so many.
So many.
Gosh. But the last story in the book is one that's sort of standard. Yeah, it's sort of standard story, like someone who's stood till the end, and a redemption story combined, but it came on a deathbed. And that story, oh my gosh. I mean, it was someone who, and I actually do use names because she was very public about it. I found out about this story on Facebook, and it's this family, and they're very holy. I mean, there's a priest in the family who died young of cancer. There's a bunch of different things that happened to this family, but It's a couple where the man, high school sweethearts, the man left because of trauma. Just I think his mother had died tragically when he was young or a teenager, and then he just tried to cope. He loved his wife, but he couldn't cope with life, and he went off. He became a drug addict, very sick man. They had infertility, so they did adopt a child, but they could never have their own children, so they adopted this wonderful son, but he still couldn't cope with everything that was happening. Went off, lived a life of
Debauchery.
drug addiction, a debauchery. I mean, he did have a child by a woman that he had an affair with. She did not see him for 13 years. Occasionally he would call when the son's birthday came around, but he was just in the gutter. I mean, everything was wrong. And she never took her wedding ring off. And everybody said, leave him, divorce him. What is going on? You know, you deserve to be happy and all this stuff. She said, no, I made a vow. I love Sean. I love him. I love him. And so she just prayed. 13 years, didn't see him. Got a call. All she wanted was just, is there any way I can help this man get to heaven? He's my husband. Got a call 13 years in. Her husband was dying of cancer, pneumonia. He had drug addiction. He had all these things that happened. They had never officially divorced. She was able to come in those 3 days that he was in the hospital, pray with him, hold his hand, get a priest in there. He, you know, last rites, confession, everything that, you know, a Catholic would want at their deathbed, praying the rosary. I forgive you, telling him in his ear how much she loved him. She forgave him. She just wanted him to go to Jesus. She just, I mean, every bit that she ever wanted to give to him, that love, she did. And he died knowing he was forgiven, knowing he was loved unconditionally by his wife. And it is the most beautiful story. It is just absolutely stunning. And she didn't end the story in the middle. She went and kept her vow until death parted them. And the grace that came from that story and the people who were affected by that story are just, it's still going on. So it was that might have been my favorite one.
Did he ever say, did he ever say sorry, or did, you know? And
he always, you know, everyone understood that he was so troubled, but that he still had a loving heart, like that he didn't do any of this to hurt people. So like you said, you know, people are just broken. And so I'm not privy to what was said between them, but there's a picture I have even on my blog that has, that they're holding hands, and you could tell he's very pale and ready to die.
Important.
And they're holding hands, and she never took her rings off. And it was just so beautiful. So that story, and his family and her family and everybody understood that was a picture, a snapshot of Christ's unconditional love. And it's all she ever wanted was to pour out that love for her husband. And she was able to do that and lead him to heaven in his last days.
Yeah.
So.
Well, actually, I misjudged the time. I thought we were a half hour off, but this is actually at our hour. But I wanted to speak to that point before we go off the air, because so many of my standards, so many people say, well, I'll take my spouse back when they say I'm sorry. Mm. And I said, most prodigals don't say I'm sorry. And if Christ waited for us to say I'm sorry and then take us back, there'd be no one in heaven. But what Christ says is, I'll take you back with your filth and all. Think of the prodigal father, right? His son was coming back, shoulders slumped. I'm so sorry, I'm a failure. You know, and he was a Jewish boy who had been feeding pigs. You know, so that goes against Jewish law. And his father was like, take him. So if you are having a troubled marriage right now and you just want your person back, your husband or your wife, I'm begging you to not wait for them to say they're sorry, but you be the one first, say, I'll take you back in any condition you come. Then, and only then, might they say I'm sorry. If my husband had waited for me to say I'm sorry, we'd never be back together. He took me back, and it was about 30 years. And it was a little tiffy thing, kind of, and he's like, you know, you never said I'm sorry. And of course, in my mind, because now it's been so many years later, I was like, I didn't, did I? Because he just took me back with no questions asked. I had an opportunity, and I sobbed, Leila, It was Holy Thursday of 2013, and the Lord just said, "You gotta write it now." I had spent time apologizing to everyone I'd offended that God was really working with me. And He said, "You got one more person," and it occurred to me I needed to write. So I wrote him this letter. I'm like, "I'm sure you'll never forgive me, but I just apologize for this and this and this and things he didn't even know about." I said, "I need to let you know that this happened and this happened, and I'm just so sorry." And he was living in North Carolina at the time, and I was living in Virginia because of his job, but he met up here to go to church. And so I said, "Please, read this before we go to church," because I thought church would at least help him to not be so mad. So we meet in church and we're praying, and he's all kind, and I'm like thinking, dang, he didn't read the stupid letter, right? And then I mentioned something later, and I said, you didn't read? He goes, "Yeah, I read it." So why aren't you? He goes, "I forgave that years ago," right? So I just want people to know, don't wait for the apology. When it's right, it will come. And some people never really say it with their mouth, but there comes a point in your marriage that's been redeemed. I no longer need the apology. Your actions, your love, our history, that was the old me. You're fine.
Right.
It is such a beautiful thing. So
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, your story is so powerful. I mean, you would not even know it. It's just, yeah, when I read it, because I knew you before you submitted the story, but when I read the story, I was like, I had no idea.
I cried because you're just this nice Catholic writer, and you've got your 8 kids and your 73 grandchildren and a happy marriage, right? like I just want to know what it's built. And I cried as I wrote it, and I shook because I was like, I gotta delete that. Maybe take that part.
I love that part in the story where you're like, I just want to delete this right now.
I do. And I was like,
yeah,
put it out there. And it's been so easy for me to share even more of my story, because I thought, the heck with it. You know what? This is my story.
Oh, yeah.
And
it helps a lot. It helps a lot of people. It helps
Leila
a lot
Miller,
of people.
Impossible Marriages Reconciled, Primal Loss, and Now Adult Children of Divorce Speak. Where can our viewers get these books?
So you can get them on Amazon. You can also go to my website. You can learn more about them, and that's leilamiller.net, and it's Leila Miller.net. And I never want money to be part of why someone couldn't read the book. So if you need a PDF, a free copy, I always am happy to supply that. And you would just need to email me through my website, or it's Leila at leilamiller.net. Yeah. Just put that in the,
right below the show. They can look
in the notes.
They'll see it.
Yep. Because I never want anyone to not have access to what they need to save their family. Yeah. So anyway.
So funny. There's so many people that call me because of my website. And my husband's like, you're talking to a lot of standards, a lot of people in troubled marriages. And I say, you know what? I haven't found a way to capitalize on that. However, if I have to pick between making $200 or saving a marriage, I just got to go for the marriage, and God will bless me somehow. So I get calls just before we went on the air, I told the girl, I got to hang up because I got to do a radio show. But you know what? Brought her into our standards group and said, you're going to be encouraged here. But I appreciate that you do that, because this really shows your heart for marriage, your heart for being a good Catholic wife, being a good Catholic mother, being an obedient daughter of the Most High God, which is ultimately our greatest goal. Do you have any other message you want to give our listeners? Let me end it the way I always do. Name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today.
Oh, wow. I would say, oh my goodness, forgive. Do not, can I say this now? Do not be petty. Do not be petty with your spouse.
Don't be like me.
Don't be like me. I mean, respect. I could speak to women here. Respect your husband's manhood, his masculinity. Rejoice that God made him a man and not a woman. Love the fact that he is a man and not a woman, and respect it and love him. And one little quick thing, tell him that you love his manly muscles. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. Serious? If you do that, see what happens. Most men are like, oh, like even if they don't have manly muscles, they will feel so like happy all of a sudden. So that's just one little tip to make it just a nice moment for you and your husband, because he won't be expecting it, but
I'm gonna
but
try
suddenly
that.
his testosterone will go up, and he'll be really happy, and maybe it could start a nice new chapter in your marriage. But but anyway, just yeah, forgive easily, and be easily pleased, like you say in your book. You know, be a woman who can be easily pleased.
Well, that's what I'm going to do differently. Because just listening to you, I'm going to go downstairs and remind my husband how happy I am because of him. And another note I wrote to myself was pray to the Lord in my prayer time. And I have been praying this, but not as daily, and I should. Help me to see myself clearly. Help me to
Yes.
see whatever flies, painful as it is, Lord, help me to see what is most affecting me and my holiness, you know, or my marriage.
Yes. So every time you see a sin in your spouse, stop and instead find what it is that you need to be working on in yourself instead. Replace that concern with, you know, circling the sin of your spouse with looking into my own, where do I need to be more virtuous? And then just replace that with interior introspection.
And give me the grace to be able to receive it and then start
Yes.
working on it. We
Yes.
need that grace.
Pray for the grace. You'll get the grace.
You will, because God wants to
He'll
freely
give it to you.
the Blessed Virgin was talking to who? I don't know, Faustina, and she was standing there with a whole bunch of presents in her hands. I don't know if you know this, but so many presents. They were overloaded and falling, and she said, "These are the graces that I long to give my children, and they just
Wow.
don't ask for them. So the gifts are right here, ready, and I just
Mm-hmm.
need them."
We just don't ask. Yeah.
So I'm like, "Give me the grace. I need it."
Yeah.
So,
Please.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to go and be a good wife to Dean. I'm going to go be a good wife to Danny.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I hope each of you viewers share this show. Share this show with as many people as you can. Help Leila and me save a marriage. Buy this book for a friend and just save your neighbor's marriage, save your child's marriage, save your own marriage, but be holy. Be holy.
Amen.
All right.
Amen
Well,
to
I'm going
that.
to end it the way I always do. I need you to join me in it. You remember how we do this? I
Yes,
think you do, right?
I
I'm
do.
Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I want to remind you always to live your life
Sunny
side
side
up.
up.